Why did that teacher get fired from your school? Story 1. He approached a teacher about dating, but she declined. So he had a sneaking suspicion that she was having a pupil. After that, he hired a private eye to follow her. He was arrested on stalking charges. When she learned about it, went to the police and filed a restraining order. He was let go. I don't remember her being subject to any form of punishment. That was the talented basketball player, age 17. He began by boasting, which is how it all began. Even before the instructor began pursuing her, there were rumors that she was seeing a student. Since he had heard rumors, the fired instructor engaged a private detective. The male teacher's constant presence in her classroom, even during class hours, led the majority of the students at the school to believe the two were dating. He often bought her flowers. He was always intruding on her sessions after school as the cheerleader's coach. The guy instructor suddenly turned around and stopped approaching her students. 2 months later, allegations of stalking and hiring a private investigator surfaced. Everyone assumed that after being rejected, he followed her. Story 2. He taught gym for more than 30 years. Every day at lunch, he offered to stand by the trash cans to watch that the kids emptied their food and handed their completed trays to the cafeteria staff in a timely manner. Even while my father was a student at that junior level, he had been doing this for years. One day, a student chose to throw her full tray in the garbage rather than emptying it and handing it to the cafeteria employee. He took the tray out of the garbage and offered it to her. At close range, she flung a carton of chocolate milk in his direction. In retaliation, he punched her square in the eye. I anticipated the twist to be that he had been consuming any leftover meals that had been thrown out for more than 30 years. Story 3. A student stole over $20,000 from school field excursions. She was in charge of planning all field excursions that required payment for the whole school. She prepared and collected the funds for overcharging the pupils, but she only deposited the necessary amount and pocketed the necessary amount and pocketed the balance. Stole around $20,000 over the course of decades. Was dismissed as well as charged with theft and found guilty. I'm unsure of how much time she received in comparison to the rest of the replies in this post. Financial criminality in the old-fashioned sense is absolutely healthful. Story 4. He installed a camera on the girls' side of the middle school theatrical changing room. At the start of the video, his stupid ass was adjusting a customized shoebox and turning on the camera. To cover it up, he added. When a student spotted it, she brought it home with her and her parents to see. Salutations, Mr. Goebel. Story 5. A history instructor who never really taught a history class. He sometimes yells at the students in class. After his kid perished in a desert storm, the situation worsened. He then sobbed throughout the whole of the lesson. Too many days, the assistant principal was forced to take over. He eventually stopped attending school, and we never again saw him. The best instructor I ever had was a history professor who was also really uncomfortable. Sadly, he was a drinker, but he was also witty and a fantastic storyteller. The kind who would act like he was fighting while waving a broomstick. He would nonchalantly bite on the chalk out of his hand throughout all these amazing tales, as if it were peanuts. This was one of his strange habits. He sometimes intended to write something on the blackboard, but discovered that he had eaten all the chalk before doing so. Story 6. Really, he was merely a stand-in. Left more quickly than he did. Informed our class. He trains in judo. A pupil then instructed him to demonstrate a maneuver. He used a sleeper hold to put the pupil to sleep in front of the class as a demonstration technique, which earned him a charge of abusing a child. This seems like a situation that belongs in a comedy. Handed a pupil written affirmation of the zero tolerance policy, emphasizing that any two kids participating in a fight would get the same penalty the next time the youngster was mistreated. I could just imagine the sub climbing through the classroom window and hauling ass to his vehicle from there. Story 7. He absolutely tore into the bully and began bashing him in the head with the lid of a garbage can. Once the student demonstrated that he had obtained assurance that he wouldn't be punished more harshly for resisting from that point on, the written confirmation was effectively utilized to demand that both pupils suffer the same punishment. I need it in writing since it essentially served as a get-out-of-jail-free pass. Story 8. She succeeded in being dismissed despite the fact that it is very difficult to do so in Germany where professors are tenured. Miss M was an art instructor and a poor artist. She expected her pupils to succeed where she had failed and constantly required them to enter art competitions. We detested them because we didn't want to have our ingenuity used to boost the ego of a psychotic witch with a drinking problem. So we began to protest a bit. During the parent-teacher conferences, we put pressure on our parents to prevent her from holding the competitions and at the same time simply refused to turn in our work. Things rapidly deteriorated. She didn't react well to it. She was having a really horrible day and going off on some senseless diatribe about anything. When another art instructor came on the door and asked his student to enter via her room to go to his room, since his room's door lock was broken. Key 25 students moved awkwardly around the classroom in quiet as Ms. E vented her annoyances to the other instructor, who disregarded her and went to his room. He poked his head back through the door a few moments later. He asked for a chair since his class needed more than he had. Ms. M totally lost what little sanity she had left and assaulted him violently with a chair, striking him with it while yelling hysterically about his disrupting her priceless lesson. Since he remembered that his door was damaged, he escaped via her classroom. He then went directly to the headmaster, who entered and placed her on disciplinary leave in front of the whole class. She vanished without a trace. Story 9. My dad temporarily filled in as a teacher after he had retired. As he was doing black magic for 5th graders, he was once physically taken from the school. He performed a card trick and was chopping a piece of paper so that it could be passed through by walking. He presently has a permanent exclusion order against Deer Park Public Schools in Washington. Story 10. He attended a different school after mine, not mine. I think he was hired to coach soccer, but anyway, he ended up instructing cheerleading. He ultimately began dating a 14-year-old pupil. In her journal, the girl wrote about it. Her mother saw it, phoned the police, and they made the daughter make him an invitation to have sex. As he knocked on the door, they leaped out and took him into custody. 20 years ago, this happened. I believe he is now gone. Story 11. He was failing every class he took. He explained nothing clearly and talked incoherently. And he would reply with, if someone questioned him, ask someone else who is knowledgeable, as if we would ever ask him anything until the whole class was in confusion. My last chemistry instructor was this. Halfway through the year, he was let go. After that, we had a period without any chemical courses. The second chemistry instructor offered us a 3-week crash course at the end of the year, since she was unable to fill all the open slots. As comparison to the first 6 months working with a dismissed employee, I learned more in those 3 weeks. Story 12. He screened Pulp Fiction for us in history class, but failed to remove the tape before putting away the AV equipment. Story 13. A former partner was raised in a Wyoming small-town enclave. While they had a lengthy lunch break one day, their instructor was leaving the building with a group of individuals wearing suits and uniforms from the military. It turns out that he exchanged dog tags with a soldier who was killed in Vietnam, and the soldier's parents enlisted when their son stopped calling or visiting. He had hidden in one of the most remote areas of the country, and it took him ample time to complete his degree and find employment. Story 14. He was a fantastic instructor, but it turns out there was a reason he constantly shut his laptop when we passed by. Using the school's Wi-Fi, he was viewing pornographic content in the 6th grade classroom. Story 15. She almost lost her job because of it, but she managed to remain. On prom night, she became pregnant with one of her pupils. She discovered this after he graduated. The most amusing aspect is that she taught sex education. Story 16. A man who kept a samurai sword in his trunk decided to take it out during a fire drill so he could demonstrate it to onlookers. The greatest part was that when he was dismissed, people distributed flyers with altered pictures of him dressed as samurai with the slogan, "Free my buddy samurai." So, Story 17. Since he was betrothed to another instructor, he was urged to quit. He earned more money as a carpenter, and they are still happily married. A great man. Story 18. To provide children access to restricted literature, They displayed a QR code for the Boston Public Library. Not quite dismissed, but written up for disciplinary action. The student finally departed the school during the process. Story 19. This guy taught social studies. One day in class, he also served as the girls' swim team coach. The erroneous file was selected once he connected his computer to the projector. The video he had planned to show the students was replaced with one showing the girls' swim team utilizing the school showers. When it occurred, a female from the swim team was in the class. The local cops fired the guy and removed him from the school. Story 20. Since a kid wasn't sitting still and showing respect for our 5th grade mock graduation ceremony, she full-bodied him against the wall and began ranting at him. She was large and 6 feet 2 tall. He was weak. You could probably guess what happened. Yet since she was, well, liked, she was rehired as a hall monitor. A black child was called a cotton picker. He was a scientific instructor, and we were doing an experiment using cotton ball. I'm not sure whether he imagined that this statement could have resulted in anything other than his instant dismissal. Story 21. She said that the guy was a witless brat who only passed each year because his father was a dishonest lawyer who bribed the school so he wouldn't fail every subject since he was an asshole and always treated her disrespectfully. Everybody agreed that she was correct. 1 week later, she was let go. Story 22. All of her biology lessons were divided into 2 days. On the first day, you would study in class all day. Then on the second day, you would spend time in the lab learning the experiments. The issue with the approach is that after failing an exam, we would learn all we needed to know in our lab. We had just failed the exam collectively as a class. She always shown attitudes when we approached her and told her what was happening. The worst aspect is that she slammed us with a solution rather than offering to assist. While I was in school, no one offered assistance and then instructed us to just study our textbook. We were perplexed when she requested for homework that was supposed to be provided at one point. As it turns out, she never requested that we publish it. We then informed her that she placed the responsibility on us and stated we should have spoken out about the assignment not being posted. In the class I was in, 25 out of 27 students ended up failing the class, with the remaining students narrowly passing. We gave her a review, but I wasn't aware that not only had my class written a negative evaluation with their own personal tales, but that she had also received negative ratings from her other 2 students. On the last day of class, she was fired. Story 23. I don't punch anybody with my spectacles, he said. She removed them. He gave ground. That's what I thought, she said. He was a nuisance and nothing more. She dissuaded him, even more than 20 years afterwards. She handled it wonderfully, in my opinion. She was let go because the school board disapproved. Story 24. She sort of stopped teaching us lessons and basically spent her time venting about her marital issues on a group of 13-year-olds, which in retrospect I believe was a little harsh of the school to dismiss her for it. Story 25. My stepdad was that instructor. He lost his job because he assaulted his pupils physically. For the pupils' benefit, unfortunately my siblings and I were unable to just fire him. The only place he could find work after that, as a side note, was on a reserve. There was no protracted hiring procedure when he began doing so with those pupils. They basically wrecked the automobile and damaged our home. Done in. I respected the deity of those res children. Story 26. Allegations of instructor abuse were made by certain kids. Teacher lost his job, ruining his career. Later, it was discovered that the student's testimony was entirely untrue, and many other students were aware that the student was planning to lie because he didn't like the instructor. Even throughout the whole ordeal, the youngster produced a bogus police complaint. Everything was revealed afterwards, but the man's life had already been destroyed. To my former AutoCAD instructor, this occurred. A girl said that he had been sleeping with her and caused her to get pregnant. She was underage, so it all the way to court. She wasn't pregnant, it turned out. She had never shared a bed with him and didn't like for him since he liked to leap, frightening classmates who weren't paying attention in class. His career was gone and his marriage was destroyed by the claims. He almost completely disappeared off the radar, so I have no idea where he is right now. About the girl, her Facebook account reveals she is a member of Imam, and she is now known as Karen. She is renowned for abolishing one of the most well-liked electives the former school ever offered. Sports or music weren't that. Story 27. That was terminal, but I'm not sure what. For himself and his family, he needed more vacation time. The school board apparently refused to allow any more since he had already used up all of his permitted vacation and sick leave. So he just left. Can't work in the district any longer as a result of it. Apparently, I did. He was adored by everyone. One of the few professors that really cared about his work and his pupils. No wrongdoing was committed by the woman who was brought in to take his position, yet no one could fully succeed him. As a result, the grade for the whole class plummeted by around 5 points. He was one of the few professors I really worked extremely hard to impress, thus I missed him a lot. Story 28. An American flag was burnt in the classroom as an example of free expression. She was a teacher of language arts. She not only blatantly lighted a fire in the classroom, in addition to the many groups of individuals who would be offended by that. Story 29. Not someone who was terminated, but someone who very certainly ought to have. Our homeschool instructor failed to replenish our supplies, allowing the kids to consume spoiled food. I'm not referring about slightly spoiled food. Before using carrots, she had them scrape out the whole black coating, and she made them chop the mold off of potatoes instead of peeling them. The school didn't start talking to her until we threatened them, and nobody believed us until we had visual evidence. All of my nation's food safety bureaus. Mom no longer made us consume expired food. She nonetheless continues to work there now. Story 30. When the principal saw a student yelling and hurling a test at the biology instructor's face, the principal dismissed the teacher. The school administration had previously had a few run-ins with the teacher, so they took advantage of the circumstance to terminate her for failing to exert control over the children. A few years later, I went into a bakery, and there was my former instructor. She made the store's owner pleased, and her staff was highly complimentary of her Story 31. For hypnotizing kids, my high school's principal was sacked. Everyone was okay with his doing it when he did it at school events and other things. Some of the seniors in my class were captivated by him after graduation. My favorite thing I've ever seen. Nevertheless, he wasn't attempting to hit on high school females, so this isn't heading in the direction you expect. He was hypnotizing the football squad before games to improve, it was discovered. Not that it succeeded. They've always been Jets and likely still are. But it was exposed as cheating, and as a result, he lost his job.